Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Liam, the Prove It Guy, author of Limitation Is A Mirage. In this podcast, I will be sharing with you actionable tips, routines, and insights that I have gathered over 20 years of extensive study with masters, experts, and world-class performers. My hope with this podcast is to save you time, money, and frustration, helping you fast-track your way to mastery. Hey, it's Liam the Prove It Guy, and welcome back to the Limitation Is a Mirage podcast. You'll often hear me tell people that you should try everything. For all you know, you are the greatest at something, and you just never give yourself the opportunity to do that. So a good example is the time that I was on a boat. So if you've been around me for any length of time, you've probably heard me say I was on a boat or sang the Lonely Island song, I'm on a boat. Because I think it's about 8 years ago now, I was teaching Tai Chi in the station center. So Tai Chi is the slow moving martial arts that I teach. I was teaching it in the station center, and one of the ladies that worked in the station center asked me, was I up for a challenge? And it turned out that the night before, she was chatting to a man in a pub, and he had the opportunity to take a boat from Carrickfergus to Plymouth. So it was a racing yacht, maybe even a schooner, I'm not sure, but it was definitely a 37-foot racing yacht. And he had said to her in the pub that he just needed a few, what did he call it? Men, not sailors, a few like deckhands, something, a few people, able-bodied people willing to put a bit of effort into sail a boat. And he just asked, did she know anyone? And she happened to know that I was going to be in the class the next day teaching my class. So she told him that I would probably be up for it. So whenever I arrived for my class on Friday, I taught my class as normal. And after the class, Stimton asked me, was I up for helping sail a boat from Carrickfergus to Plymouth? There's two important things to know. Is one, I was never in Carrickfergus before or Plymouth. And the only boat I'd ever been on before this was a P&O ferry when we went over to Wales to visit family. And I immediately said yes, without asking any questions. When it was anything, I just said yes. Because that was at a stage I was going through where I was just trying to find myself. So I was agreeing to do anything that would be a challenge just to see what I was capable of. So Andy emailed me on the Friday. So they sent over my email address. He emailed me on the Friday and asked me had I any questions about sailing the boat. And my response to the email was, no, this would be like me asking you, have you any questions about learning Tai Chi? Because you have no idea at all. You don't even know what questions to ask. So I agreed to do it. And a week later, I taught my Tai Chi class as normal. Then Andy picked me up from the station center. This is the first time I ever met this guy either. And we drove to Carrickfergus. So we get to Carrickfergus and I meet his son who's coming along with us. I think he was slightly younger than me at the time. But he had grown up on boats, and Andy had grown up around boats. He'd sailed all over the world. He was just back from doing a loop of Ireland. I'm not sure how long it took or why they did that, but it was something that they did. And when I got there, we had bits and pieces to fix in the boat. I didn't know any boating terms or nautical terms, if you want to be fancy. But I helped build things and put things together, just do whatever was asked of me. Again, I still had no idea what was going on or what we were going to be doing. Or how we were even going to do it. And I remember it didn't really dawn on me how much of a task this was until I was in the yacht club. We went to the yacht club that night, and then people were fancy. These were Carrickfergus fancy yacht club people, and then there was me, and I just looked like some homeless guy that they had just picked up who had agreed to do this, is just dressed in casual clothing and ripped coat because I was told I needed to bring spare clothes that I didn't mind getting ruined. So I'm in there and chatting away to people, and eventually they started introducing me as that guy that was going on the boat journey. So I went over to Andy and I said to him, how come everybody keeps introducing, instead of saying Liam, they're saying he's the guy that's agreed to go on this boat journey? And he was like, I don't think you understand how crazy this is. You're going to sail down the coast of Ireland and then across to Plymouth. It's going to take us about 3 days. It was supposed to take us. It's going to take us about 3 days. We're going to do this, and still at that stage, I still didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. I thought, sure, can't be that hard. I'm just getting on a boat. It was like the P&O ferry. It took about 12 hours, so this will be 100%. So I worked around with people. I ended up doing some magic in the room. I did a trick for a skeptical man that seemed to be very angry at me, which happens whenever you're performing magic. There, every so often, especially when I did pubs and nightclubs and stuff, you just meet someone that just wants to be an asshole and wants to ridicule you. And we're in this posh yacht club, and I'm doing a routine with his wife, and then I do this whole bit where I say, "Is this your card?" And she says no, and then there's an extra bit to the routine. But the guy loved that I got it wrong and just kicked off. So he was nearly ruining the routine. He's ruined the flow of the routine anyway, but he kicked off and started laughing and telling me how magic was stupid and I should get a real job and this, that, and the other. And I threw the deck of cards off the wall and stormed off to head out the door. And the wife apologized to me for her husband being so rude. And a couple of people laughed that I couldn't handle his heckling. And then the husband came over to apologize, and I was like, "What are you apologizing for?" And he goes, "Oh, for ruining your routine, and then for making you storm out." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not storming out. When I threw the deck, the card that his wife had chose and signed was stuck to the wall in the yacht club." I was like, "No, I'm just showing you the rest of the routine." This is one of the things I really love about learning something and getting really down into it, so you know everything. So on the fly, you can make changes and you can swap things out. So the fact that the card appeared on the wall just blew his mind as well as everybody else's, and just made the routine so much more fun. But they all thought I was mental. That was the gist of this conversation. They thought like it was just a crazy thing to plan. Not even to plan, just to agree to do. So I ended up working on the boat. We ended up taking about 2 days to get the boat ready. The weather wasn't great, so we didn't want to sail out. This had an engine, but we weren't really... The engine wasn't designed to power us. It was just designed to be like a wee backup. The sails were the power, wind power. We were very green back then. So we worked on it, and it ended up we were just running out of time. The reason we were delivering the boat was because one of the guys' friends was actually racing it from Plymouth to Rhode Island, as far as I remember. And this was like I think it happens every year. It's a race that happens every year. And our job was just to deliver the boat there. So rather than him sail it and then having to sail on, he was just going to have a rest and then drive down. He was a really lovely guy, and he had built the boat mostly himself, which, as you'll find out later, looked really good and was really good for him, not so good for us. So whenever we ended up just running out of time and we had to sail out, we didn't have the power to get out of the pier. So there was I don't know if they were scouts or something, but there was two groups. The ones going back and forward in boats. I don't even know what they would... You probably noticed by now, I'm not really nautical. I don't know what terms to use or whatever. So if you want to give me grief about that, that's fine. Or teach me. Actually, don't teach me because I don't want to learn. I didn't learn on the journey. I'm not going to learn now. But we convinced them to tow us out. And I remember when we got out of the pier and into the water. This is my first time on sea on a wee boat. I'm in oilskins, which are like fancy clothes you wear in boat that... I didn't know this at the time, but they're supposed to keep you dry. I should have known by the name, oilskin. The water's supposed to run off them, but mine's actually had a hole in it. So the whole time my ass was soaking. You know the way whenever you get out of the bath and your fingers are all like wrinkly? That's how my ass was the entire journey. It just felt like wee wrinkly fingers, but a bum, not a fingers. And again, I didn't find this out we ended up on the boat for 9 days. It should have been 3 altogether, but I think it ended up 9. And I remember saying to Andy at the end, "God, I'm glad to get these oilskins off. My ass is soaking. I can't wait just to get in dry clothes." And then he explained that they're supposed to be waterproof, and if there was a hole in it, I should have swapped them out for the other ones. But I didn't know that at the time. I just hammered on. But I remember when we pulled out of the pier, and the boat was sort of sideways, and like I was just touching the water at the side, and I was looking up at Andy, and there was another guy that came along with us. He ended up just last minute joining us, and I can't remember his name. It's just escaped me. But he ended up joining us last minute and just agreeing to thankfully he did, because if he didn't, it would have been a complete nightmare, because he actually knew what he was doing as well. But I remember looking at the two guys, and as you know, I do a lot of body reading and language reading, and I'm very good at picking up on subtle cues, whether people are comfortable or not comfortable. And these two guys were not comfortable. So I said to them, is this is this normal? Is this a normal thing to be like? Is the way this water is splashing about here, and the fact that the boat's up at a 80-degree angle, is this normal? Because to me, it could have been normal. I didn't know. And they told me they just lied. They said, yeah, this is fine. This is the way it always is. This is good sea, they told me, which I knew was a complete lie. But at the time, because I was a bit freaked out about this in general, because it was a crazy thing to decide to do, I just allowed my brain to just bypass all the cues and signs that I was seeing for how they were chatting complete shite. And I just pretended that they were serious and this was normal, completely normal behavior. I wasn't wearing gloves at the time. I was messing about with the water, and Andy told me that I should go and get my gloves just to keep my hands warm because eventually they'd get cold. So I climbed down the wee stairs. It was like a wee ladder into the underbelly of the boat, or the deck is what I was on. Whatever the room in the cabin, the whole thing was a cabin. Wherever, I went down a ladder anyway. And as bad as it was above, like on deck, below was like 1,000,000 times worse. No exaggeration, 1,000,000 times worse. Immediately I thought, I'm going to be sick. Then I thought I was going to pass out. Then I looked at Andy's son and he was green. And I knew he had been on boats for years and was just like a sailor man. He like Popeye. He was a sailor guy, so it should have been fine for him. So the fact that he was green and looked like he was going to be sick just made things worse. And I sat down on the edge of my bed and I tried to put my gloves on, which I don't know how long it took me, but it felt like an eternity just trying to do this. So 1,000,000 times worse, and I was down there for an eternity. So it was just a complete nightmare. And part of my brain, something just clicked. Like I thought I was goner. Like I was like, this is going to be it. I'm going to start throwing up. Turns out I do get seasick, because they did ask me, do I get seasick? And I was like, I don't know. I've never been on the sea before. So I thought to myself, this is it. I'm going to be here. And I knew where we were going. First, we were going to go down the coast of Ireland, and it was going to be about 21 hours before we docked somewhere. And in my head, I was just like, I know my dad's soft. If I can ring him when I get to, I think it was Wexford or Waterford, one of those two. I was like, it's fine. If I ring him when I get there, he'll come get me. So that was in my head. And then whatever it is that's in me to just challenge myself and to push through barriers and to just try to achieve the goal that I've set out to achieve, that little thing just crept in and was just like, if you can get back up on deck, you'll be fine. So that was my goal. My next goal was to get on deck. I got my gloves on, and it must have taken me about 5 minutes just to climb the ladder. And the ladder was not big. It made it be about 5 steps. So I climbed the ladder and I got out, and the two boys looked at me, and I could tell when they looked at me that they were like, yep, this guy's coming up here to throw up. And my stubbornness or whatever it was just did not allow me to throw up. And I ended up just sitting up on deck, and I actually refused to go back down the rest of the time. I stayed there for the next 21 and a half hours, or 20 and a half hours, however long it was to get to wherever we were going, Wexford or Waterford, which for anyone that doesn't know is the bottom of Ireland. So if I had thought about this, I was going to talk about this, I would have looked into which one it actually was. But I was asked did I want to steer the boat or sail the boat, and it was just a rotor, I think it's called, just a big stick with a fin on the end of it. And whenever I didn't, again, no idea, didn't understand the instruments, didn't understand the sea, didn't have a clue. So Andy said to me, just keep us at 5 degrees, and we stay at 5 degrees until I tell you different. So in my head, I was like, right, the boss man said 5, keep that wee ball thing at 5 degrees. So instead of just holding it and letting it move and bounce around, and every time you went off direction, just pulling yourself back, the wrestler came out in me. I ended up like headlocking this thing, and the sea was rough. So I was bouncing all over the place, and it kept smashing into my ribs. And the two, Andy and your other man, went down to like plot the course or do work or sleep, or so. I don't know what they went to do. I was too busy trying to have a fight with the sea. And maybe about 3 hours later, they had been shouting up to me and stuff and asked me did I need anything or whatever. And I was happy enough just hammering on. And about 3 hours later, Andy came up and he watched me for about 30 seconds and was like, what are you doing? I go, I'm trying to keep this on 5 degrees. It keeps like moving. And then he taught me what I should have known because I've teach flow and movement for years. was just to don't fight the sea, which seems like a stupid thing to say, but don't fight the sea. Just go with it. And then every time you go off course, just pull it back, keep bringing yourself back on course. And that just, every time now I do anything, it's like a wee metaphor in my head. Anytime I have a challenge, like working with this Academy 4 programs, every time I came up against something that was difficult, or every time I came up against something that I knew was going to take a lot of work, or I kept getting distracted, like with lockdown and everything that was going on, I just remembered that little statement in my head. Don't fight it, go with the flow. And every time you drift off, just know where you're going, still have that in mind, and then pull yourself back and direct yourself there. So that's what I ended up doing, and I did this for about, whatever it was about 21 hours. It was amazing. I wish I had the shittiest camera with me that was downstairs, and I was not going to get that. But a GoPro on the side would have been mighty, because we were only about 1 to 2 mile off the coast. So for most of the journey, you could see the entire coast the whole way down. So that was just amazing to see. Except whenever you watch cars, because they were flying past, and we were going about 1 nautical mile an hour, and they were flying on. But it was really one of my favorite movies. I've talked about this before, is Waterworld. So probably why I agreed to do it in the first place. But I really enjoyed the fact that I was on the sea and I could see the land and stuff. And just thinking about, well, whenever in Waterworld, whenever they got to the land, but you could see it. It was just an amazing thing, and all these wee secret beaches the whole way down. Like, I love the sea. I love going to the beach. You're just seeing all that was amazing. And then we got parked up, whatever. We spent the night and tried to sleep. I wasn't really sleeping at all at this point. I wasn't really great at sleeping outside of my house in general, so trying to sleep on a boat was just a nightmare. And again, because I'm stupid and didn't know anything about boats at the time, now I know everything that there is to exist about boats. I thought I would sleep to get away from the noise of the people speaking when I tried to sleep, I tried to sleep at the front of the boat, whatever it's called. But like, it was just, I remember shoving my shoulder under a beam and trying to pin myself into the bed, and then you had to put like a net that caught you up hooked in, and then like you'd be lying for about 30 seconds, and then you'd end up lying in the net, and then you'd get rolled over. It was just a nightmare. It was about day 3 before they informed me that that's the worst place to sleep, that I should try to sleep in one of the bunks in the middle of the boat. So we're sailing, we take off anyway from Waterford or Wexford, whichever one we were, and like, things just start to go wrong. Again, I'm not much help because I don't know what they're talking about 90% of the time, but I remember at one stage we had a wee paraffin oven, so we could cook like wee pizzas that we had brought with us and make toast and stuff. And I remember the sea was choppy, and the guy was pouring the paraffin in, and some of it spilled, and when he went to clean it up, he didn't get all of it, and then when he lit it, it went on fire a wee bit. And I found this hilarious because we're in the middle of the sea, surrounded by water, and there's fire, and we're having to throw a fire blanket over it. So that was interesting. At one point, because again, like I said, he had made everything perfectly for him, like even the CD racks fitted his CDs, and he had a spice rack, because he's going to be on this boat for about 12 weeks, I think it was. So we had a spice rack that fitted the type of spices, so the round ones that he liked and stuff was. But it meant that every time we walked under things, they were good height for him, but terrible for us. So you'd be banging your head at stuff and walking into things. And at one point, one of the engines failed, which meant that one of the instruments was failed, or a couple instruments. And we had to dismantle all this stuff because we were all bigger than the guy, so none of us could reach in to get what was going on. She had to take off the ladder, and then Andy fixed it. I actually, again, don't know what was wrong. The best time that something went wrong and I didn't have a clue was when our rope snapped, and I climbed up the pole. It's about 40 foot or something like that to get the rope. And I remember being at the top of the rope, and when I got there, I thought, I don't even know what I'm doing up here. He said all these words, but I don't know what he meant. And I'm shouting down, asking what I'm here for, and he's shouting out nautical terms. It ended up being a rope that was red and white that I needed to pull down. And when I was pulling it down, it wrapped around my hand, and my hand got pinned to the bar or the pole, and the pole swinging side to side. It was just complete madness. But the point of telling this story, I really enjoyed telling this story because it was like definitely the maddest thing I've ever done is go and live in a boat for 9 days. There was many other things that went on with it, but I'm always telling people that they should try things. You never know what you're going to be amazing at. You never know what you're even going to be good at. So you should try everything. So I tried to be a sailor. I tried to be Waterworld man. I love Waterworld, but I can't actually tell you the name of the character that Kevin Costner plays in Waterworld at all. I don't know. He has web feet. I know that much, and he can swim real good. And he has a wee friend. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. Great movie. One of the best bits about the trip was whenever we got to Plymouth, there was a Waterworld boat, the catamaran, I think it's called. There was like one of them there. I was like super delighted when we got there, and when I got off the boat and stood on the ground, like we had been on the boat so long that the movement, my equilibrium had balanced out to the movement. So when I got onto the ground, it was like everything was moving. So it was like the ground was the sea. It was madness. But I remembered in Waterworld whenever he was saying it doesn't feel right. That was the same for me. And then I went to have my first shower in 9 days and got into an all-white cubicle, and then everything moved. So I ended up having to sit on the floor and shower whilst 3 German men showered together in the thing beside me. It was just the whole thing was just a mad experience. But I learned a lot about myself, and I got to challenge myself in a way that most people don't. But I think what I really love about the fact that I actually did that was that I actually did that. There was plenty of opportunities, like to the first 2 days when we didn't take off, that I could have just went home. Like my dad would have picked me up, so it would have been fine. When I was going down the coast, I knew that like it's only a mile. I could probably swim that and then like ring my dad, but like I'm wherever I am, ask some poor farmer where I was and get my dad to come and get me. I was about 24 or something like that at the stage, or maybe 26. I'm not 100% sure. And I was still thinking, it's all right, my dad will get me. So again, when I got to Waterford or Wexford, I thought the same thing, that my dad will come and get me. I'd have to know where I was for him to do it, but so there was opportunities for me to give up. I could have just lay down in the bed and just cabbaged and threw up for a while and then just did nothing. But I actually learned a lot doing it, even just not just about myself, but about like I learned how to chart a course and how to read the navigation system. I learned how to read the buoys. They flash a certain amount of times for meaning different things. So I learned how to do all of that. I also experienced something that was quite awesome, even more awesome than the Waterworld bit maybe, was we had dolphins just appear one night, and they just swam and dived alongside us for maybe about half an hour or even longer. Like they were crossing in front of the boat and beside us. Now it was just really cool to see. And then another thing that happened, I'd been awake for a very long time at this point, and I was on my own. I was doing all the night shifts because I just wasn't sleeping, and I'm a night owl anyway, so I just was enjoying it. But it was quite cloudy, and at night I love stargazing and things like that, so it was amazing at night just to see how clear the sky was and like no light pollution anywhere. I also liked, I know I'm going off subject a wee bit, but I liked that any boat you did pass, any fishermen at any point like would wave at you, like they were delighted to see you as well. But there was one day it was a wee bit cloudy and there was a wee light coming through the clouds, and I hadn't been asleep for a long time, and I'm sailing away at this boat and I look up and I think, oh, there's an aeroplane. For some reason my head thought that that was an airplane, and that was the front beam of the airplane. Airplanes don't have headlights. Well, if they have headlights, they don't have like a car headlight. I ended up watching that for about half an hour, thinking to myself, God, that's weird. I'm seeing that from so far away, and it's not like got any closer, and it must be because there's no light pollution distracting it or something. And eventually Andy came up to see how I was getting on. I was like, yeah, I'm doing really good. And then I was looking up at the plane, and Andy was like, oh, the moon's really good tonight, isn't it? And that's when it dawned on me that for about half an hour I'd been watching the moon thinking it was an aeroplane coming towards me. And that was when I said to Andy, I think I need a wee break because I thought that was an aeroplane. So there was lots of mad stuff that happened. There was wee fish at the side of the boat that like glistened in the moonlight. And I had to ask Andy, were they real first? Because I thought I was going a bit mental at one stage. Like having delusions and stuff. Or like, what do you call it whenever you see things? I started thinking I was seeing things. I thought a moon was a plane. And it made me realize why in the olden days people believed that there were mermaids and why people said that mermaids pulled you in, because when you looked off the side of the boat and it's all glistening, there were these wee fish and it looked like a tail, like they were all combined together. And I can see how if you were on the boat for a long time and you were tired and ill and just hating life anyway, how you could easily have overleaned and fallen in. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happened. The dolphins were really cool. The catamaran was probably my favorite, to be perfectly honest, because I felt like I was in Waterworld. But the whole point of this story is that if you take a challenge and you actually go and do it, it's something that you will look back on. I've been looking back on this for years, and anytime I do anything, no matter how hard it is, I just think to myself, well, at least it's not 9 days on a boat. And if I can do 9 days in a boat, I can get through this. And I just use that example for everything that I do. So the more you challenge yourself, the more you can actually improve upon yourself. And the more you do that, the harder it is for life to knock you down and keep you there. I'm all about moving forward, taking on challenge, achieving it and moving forward, but taking the lessons from it, whether they completely failed or whether I succeeded at everything, and moving forward with that. So hopefully you've enjoyed that story. And if you have any questions about it, you want to ask me any questions about boats, or you want to tell me anything about boats that I don't know about, then feel free to let me know. So have an amazing day, whatever you get up to, and I will speak to you on the next podcast.